2, no surprise, we have the Jets. They definitely need Trevor Lawrence. They have so many issues all over the field. It's going to be a clusterfudge until you get rid of Adam Gase. Washington football team, Ron Rivera is not the solution. He never was. He became a very bad coach after Sean McDermott left Carolina. So I think until they get rid of Ron Rivera, they're also in for a very bad couple of years. Giants need to get rid of their general manager. He also ruined the Carolina Panthers, Dave Gettleman. I don't think that their coach is a solution. I forget his name, Jason Garrett. I think that they need a fresh start completely. And I also don't think that their quarterback, Daniel Jones, is the answer. I think that he's very mediocre. How do you downgrade from Eli Manning? So I think that these last 3 teams they're going to have a couple of years of very unfortunate seasons. Jacksonville Jaguars. Gardner Minshew, I don't think he's a permanent solution for quarterback. He's definitely not bad, but he reminds me a lot of Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think that Jacksonville Jaguars can definitely rebound themselves, but it might take a lot more than Gardner Minshew. I don't know. There's just so much to work with these last couple of teams. Minnesota Vikings, they have so much talent as opposed to these counterparts. I think that if they can just move on from Mike Zimmer and find someone who's able to utilize Kirk Cousins in the offense a bit more, they'll see some more wins. I don't think you should be relying on Dalvin Cook so often. I think that becomes very predictable, similar to how Christian McCaffrey became really predictable because those offensive coordinators didn't know how to use every player. I also think that Mike Zimmer immediately needs to hire a new defensive coordinator. Their defense is too good to be giving up all the points they're giving up. I definitely think that the Minnesota Vikings have been one of the biggest disappointments of the season, but we'll see how it goes in the future. They're definitely not on a strong showing so far. Bengals. I think the Bengals were really good this week. They were very dominant this first quarter and second quarter of their games. However, they really gave up they slipped up somewhere, and they gave up a huge deficit. I think it was about a 24-point deficit. So very shocking loss for the Bengals. Also, very humbling experience for any fan who thought that the Bengals were in any shape or form to do well. So I definitely think that Joe Burrow's on the right path, but that defense needs to get themselves together, and even offense. They need to finish games. Dallas Cowboys. Dak Prescott, biggest woo of the season. I don't think that Andy Dalton's going to help them in any shape or form. Their defense needs some huge improvements, which is shocking because I think that Dallas is a very solid lineup altogether. One of the best offenses in the NFL, but for one reason or another, they're always underperforming. I don't think that Mark McCarthy was a good pickup. I think they should have gotten Matt Rahul when they had a chance. But yeah, I think Dallas has been a huge disappointment, and they will continue to disappoint. The Falcons. As soon as they get rid of Dan Quinn, they started winning. They're on the right path. I think the Falcons are going to do very well in the next couple of years, and I wouldn't be surprised if they finish with a 9-7 record this season. Texans again. They got rid of Bill O'Brien. I think they're going to rebound like the Rams did back in 2018 when they got rid of Chip Kelly. They have a very strong quarterback. Their defense is not that bad. I think that at this point in time, they're not going to do very well, but in the next couple of seasons, depends on who they hire for head coach. They have some good years ahead of them. Chargers had a bye week, but they do need to finish games. Patriots, very unfortunate. I think Cam Newton was out for 2 weeks, and he was really rusty. Didn't expect to be as bad as he was this week. I still think the Patriots can end on a decent season, maybe 10-6, but if they're going to keep playing like they did against the Broncos, they're going to have a couple of hard games ahead of them. Lions, they showed a pretty dominant performance this week, but it was against Jacksonville. DeAndre Swift, I think that he really made a case for himself to be a pretty dominant running back in the near future, and he showed his potential, but it was only one game. I still have the Lions ranked higher than the Patriots just because I think they're more of a dominant showing this week, but we'll see how they go. Also, Matthew Stafford isn't a terrible quarterback. In my opinion, he's very similar to Ben Roethlisberger, but they don't really have that many wide receivers that are super reliable. The Broncos. The Broncos were pretty okay this week. They definitely weren't impressing anybody. They didn't have Noah Fant, but they also only put up 18 points. Drew Lock, he's definitely not their starting quarterback. He's just there. They need to draft a real quarterback. I don't know what else to put it. Um, but yeah, the Broncos were pretty dominant against the Patriots, but they barely won. They only had 18 points. So they got to figure their offense out. The Eagles. I think that the Eagles are a very strong team. Their only issue is they need linebackers desperately, and their D line is not helping them. They put way too much money in that D line, and it's mediocre at best. Um, well, mediocre in the fact that they're putting almost all the cap in that D line and barely getting any performance out of them. Darius Slay is definitely the strongest piece. Carson Wentz is not a bad quarterback. He had a very strong comeback showing again. They almost beat the Ravens, so that's why I put him at 19. And they almost beat the Steelers, so they just kind of find a way to close out games, and also not to be in such a big deficit in the first place. Cardinals. I do think that the Cardinals can be either 17 or 18. And the reason why I say that is because I put the Dolphins at 17. Now, the Dolphins have been pretty strong these past couple of weeks, so that's why I think that they're better than the Cardinals. But the Cardinals did put a pretty good showing against Dallas. However, I do think Dallas's defense isn't the best, so I think 18 is a good spot for the Cardinals. And on that note, the Panthers. I put them at 16. They did just lose, but it was to Chicago, and Chicago's a very strong team. They beat the Cardinals recently, so that's why I put them above the Cardinals. I think Matt Rahul has been doing a phenomenal job with the Panthers. I don't think anyone saw them winning more than 3 games this season. I think they're projected to be in the bottom four. So Matt Rahul is definitely showing why he was hired as a head coach. I'm definitely a fan of him at this point. I think that Dallas's biggest mistake was not hiring Matt Rahul. I think that he's going to turn the Panthers around for years to come. They, like, to put in perspective, they lost so many players. They lost K1 Short, Christian McCaffrey, like half of their O line. They lost Yetur Gross-Matos, their defensive end. They lost Dante Jackson, their best cornerback. They lost so many players, and they're still competing at a good level. They barely lost to the Chicago Bears. I just think that DJ Moore needs to get some better ball control. He could have put the game in their pocket, but it is what it is. Also, I think Teddy Bridgewater needs to stop overthrowing or underthrowing his receivers, but with an offensive line that's pretty spotty and playing one of the best defenses that probably have the best defensive line, they played okay. I think it was a strong showing. For number 15, I have the Colts. I think that the Colts are a pretty decent team. I wouldn't say they're good. I wouldn't say they're bad. I think they're mediocre. Compared to like the Dolphins and the Panthers, they have more experience on their team. They have a better defense. They have one of the best defenses in the league. They almost lost to the Bengals, but they also have a quarterback that isn't most accurate. He did have some accuracy issues with the interception to touchdown ratio, but we'll see. Um, yeah, there's really not much to say about the Colts. The Rams, really devastating loss for the Rams. I don't think anyone saw them losing to the 49ers. I personally thought that Jimmy Garoppolo wouldn't perform as well as he did this game. But yeah, I think that the Rams they're still at playoff talks. They're only 4-2, but they did get their asses beat by the 49ers. It wasn't that big of a loss, but the 49ers did put on a very strong showing. So the 49ers, they did just lose Raheem Mozart, and they had a very strong run game. Nevertheless, Kyle Shanahan continues to prove why he's such a good head coach. I do foresee that Jimmy Garoppolo will re-injure himself later on in the season. It's just one of those things that always happens when you have an injury issue. But at this point in time, they're a very strong team. However, I do see that they're going to finish off in the bottom 20s just because I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo will stay healthy. The Browns, I don't think anyone saw the Browns losing this hard this week. They lost really bad to the Ravens as well in week one. I guess they're going to have some divisional issues this year. Nevertheless, I think they're a very strong team. They have one of the best wide receiver cores, probably the best halfback duo. Baker Mayfield isn't a bad quarterback, but I don't know why they're losing so bad when they do lose. However, I think if they can get themselves together, they might be a wild card team. The Saints had a bye week. They almost lost to the Vikings, but they still were able to close out. I think that Drew Brees might be on his last or next to his last season. However, it's still a very strong team. They're going to get Michael Thomas back as well, so I think they'll be playing better than they did without Michael Thomas. So I do foresee them ending the season maybe in a top 8 spot, but I just put them behind because there are some better teams, like for instance the Las Vegas Raiders, who just beat who before the bye week beat Kansas City Chiefs. So not much to talk about them from their bye week. The Bills are on back-to-back losses. Still a strong team, but they lost to some pretty good teams, so you can't penalize them too hard. Um, Green Bay Packers. They had a really, really bad loss against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I personally thought they were the number one team before this week, but after such a strong loss, I can't justify putting them any higher than the top 8 spot. I think that Aaron Rodgers is still a very good quarterback. I think that they just got very well game planned this week. They did play Tom Brady, and Tom Brady is a very strong offensive mind, even beyond his talent. I think he's a very strong thinker, and just videos of him collaborating with Bill Belichick on game planning against some of the legendary Ravens like Ed Reed. It showed that Tom Brady knew what the matchup was, and him and Bruce Arians were able to outsmart Aaron Rodgers and defense altogether. So I think that they just had a stronger opponent mentality, where they lost to a strong opponent mentality, and I know that they'll probably have a very strong rebound in the next couple of weeks. That being said, the Buccaneers justified why they need to be a top 10 team. I still think that they're not able to crack the top 6, and you'll see in a second, but very strong showing. The Bears did just beat the Buccaneers, which is why I have them above the Buccaneers. Bears are also very sloppy. They give up way too many penalties, similar to the Buccaneers, but the Bears, like they really hurt themselves. They lost a touchdown from Eddie Jackson's pick six. I think they lost a touchdown from Eddie Jackson's fumble recovery or pick six a couple weeks back. Nevertheless, they are really sloppy on defense, and it's one of the best defenses in the league, so it's kind of unacceptable at this point in time. And I'm a Chicago person, so born and raised in Chicago, you're really upset when you see these penalties. They definitely have one of the strongest, if not the strongest, D line. Khalil Mack, Akeem Hicks. They just so much talent to go around. Also, their offense needs to be a little more consistent. They have a lot of fourth quarter strong finishes, but you definitely want to see more than just a fourth quarter strong finish. Of the 5 elite teams, I think the Ravens are maybe in the bottom tier of that 5 elite. They're still a very strong team, but they almost did just lose to the Eagles. And I think that Lamar Jackson hasn't been producing those same MVP stats. Still very strong quarterback, strong team. Their rookie Patrick Queen has been absolutely phenomenal. He had like 2 forced fumble recoveries this season. So on the defensive side, they're definitely showing some strong performances. Offense, I'm really shocked that Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews have been really shy compared to last year. But again, I just think it's because Lamar Jackson hasn't been producing some of those same numbers. And I think it deals a lot with coaches understanding how Lamar Jackson's been playing and just game planning for him. Kansas City Chiefs had a very strong win. They did lose to the Las Vegas Raiders, so I don't see them being higher than number 4 at this point in time, but still one of the best teams in the league. Titans. I think personally that the Kansas City is better than the Titans, but from a record standpoint, the Titans are undefeated, so I can't put them lower than number 3, especially since Kansas City does have a loss under their belt. I do think that the Titans are a very strong team. Defensively speaking, they do give up some big plays, but um, at this point in time, Titans are a very dominant team, and I didn't think that the Titans would be so strong. I thought that would be similar to where the Bills and the Las Vegas Raiders are, a bottom 10 team, but no, they've been making a case for why they're one of the best teams in the NFL right now. Number two, the Steelers. Steelers are a very dominant team this week. They've been dominant all season long. They almost lost to the Eagles, but they were to come back. I do think the Steelers are one of, if not the best or second best team. The reason why I put them at number two is just because the number one team were on a bye week, which would of course be the Seahawks. Seahawks, Russell Wilson's on an MVP season. I think that they're in the same caliber as the Steelers, but at this point in time, it wouldn't be fair to move them down just because they had their bye week.